Hello everyone. This is my first ever YouTube chess video and my name is David Menchik. I'm a philosopher, chess player and chess coach from Serbia. I have been playing chess for the last 15 years and I have reached a peak rating of 1952 and I've been coaching chess for the last 5 years and I have amassed a great amount of chess material, original chess material. I have also studied philosophy and finished a bachelor and master degree in philosophy, and I'm currently on PhD in philosophy. Today is my 30th birthday, and I decided there is no more prolonging and no more procrastinating. I am to start a YouTube video, and this is going to be my first ever video on the topic of decision making based on material or activity in situations in which one side or neither side has castled. We will go over only one position but in great depth, and in this position we will figure out what is to be preferred way of doing decision making basically based on material or activity. In the position here we have white to move, and white has a possibility to take the queen on h4 by playing gh, to take knight f4 and queen f4. All three possible moves. I would like you to stop the video and think a little bit, and then we will go over all the possible variations. I would give myself maybe 5 to 7 minutes to figure out all the moves to some depth. Of course, you do not have to go to great depth in this position, but if you can, of course, that would be preferred way of calculating. Alright, so taking the queen in this position when we are down a piece to start with would make the most sense. But in this exact case, since there is bishop takes d2, we wouldn't be ending up materially up, but materially down at the end, because the pawn on h4 would be hanging after the trade happens. So after gh4 and bishop takes d2, king takes d2, rook takes h4, we have just lost the pawn for nothing. Black is of course to choose, and position is pretty much lost for white with correct play. Alright, so the two serious moves in the position are queen takes f4 and knight takes f4. First, let's go over the move that is incorrect, and that is going to be queen f4 trading the queens. This position occurred in one of my student games, and he did take with the queen, thinking that after the trade of the queens, knight on f4 will be placed on a good square, and white will be at least slightly better. Well, of course, we here do not have to waste our time on any other move than trading queens, because every other move than trading queens will either lead to a passive position of the queen, of the black queen, or would hang some material. For example, just in case this doesn't seem obvious, for example, after a move queen e7, white can castle, since the knight on e2 is not hanging, as we would win the queen by either rook to e1, and then, for example, here white can continue with moves like h4, h5, and putting probably the d rook to e1, moving the knight soon, and the position is definitely at least slightly better for white. Alright, so the move queen f4 makes sense. After knight takes, of course, taking with the pawn is nonsense. We are playing only active moves and we are not destroying our pawn structure. Of course, here my student thought that the move c6 would be forced by black. Black did actually play c6. The game ended up in a draw, but after c6, we could say that white is maybe slightly better, as the knight on f4 is definitely better than the knight on b8, and maybe we could claim some kind of at least visual advantage for white. Okay. But here in this position, the move that was overlooked and is very important is the move knight c6. So now the pawn on d4 is also hanging, as well as the pawn on d5, and importantly, after the move c3, knight e7 is possible, after which There is no way that white is better in this position. The knight has placed itself on a nice square. This pawn can be moved to c6 if needed. If not, it can maybe even be pushed to c5 later on. And a move like g5 would potentially even move this knight from a good square, even though in this case it doesn't really matter, the position is equal. Of course, if we were to take on d5, black would not rush to take back on d4, but would castle instead. And this is the correct move and a better move. And here, after a move like c4 defending the knight, after knight d4, there is a double threat. King f2 is the only move, but now I would prefer black in this position. I think that after a move like c6, in some position, this knight on d5 is not placed as well as the knight on d4, and this rook is a little bit passively defending on h2. Of course, we can always play king g2, but white is at least slightly worse in this position. And we can conclude that the move queen f4, queen takes f4, is not going to be the best unless there is nothing better that we can do. So the move knight f4 is definitely possible, and here white needs to figure out all the possible moves for black to answer to it, as after knight takes f4, the queen can move, the queen must move, yeah, to g5, to e7, give a check, to d8, and let's pause the video again and figure out if there is any other move for black that white must not miss. And the possible move also that we need to figure out is, and calculate, is queen takes g3. So first of all, I would start with, after knight f4, with the move queen to d8. Queen to d8 is a very passive move, and here I would say white has a pretty nice option here, and that is to go queen b4, after which b7 is hanging, but not only b7 is hanging, but also the position is pretty bad for white, as white can't, as black can't, for black as black can't castle. The only move that is possible here to castle is going to be queen e7, which loses d5 instantly, and white is just much better. And of course, if black is allowing white to castle, move like rook e1 will happen, and yeah, black will be in huge troubles. Maybe the position is actually lost already here. So queen g5 and queen e7 are possible. Both of these moves would be okay, but white is going to be, of course, clearly better here. For instance, after a move castles long and castles short, white can play this beautiful move h4, attacking the queen again, and then if the queen moves, then h5, continuing with putting the pressure and opening the position, if possible, on the king side, where the queen is weak. Of course, the move to notice here is queen takes g3, but after rook h3, the queen is actually trapped, doesn't have any squares, and black can resign. Other than queen g5, the move queen e7 comes to mind, and this is actually the best move that black can play. But after this move, white is not going to play queen e2 or knight e2. Instead, he will play king f2. And now both d5 is hanging and the move rook e1. And the best black can do is just to give up the pawn and play something like this, after which black is, of course, much worse than in the initial position if we traded the queens. And here, pawn up, white should control the position, and this should be leading to a technical win later on in the endgame. Of course, the alternative is to play some move like queen d6, defending, but then after rook e1, king f8, rook e5, followed by maybe king g2 and rook e1, the position definitely doesn't seem good for black. Maybe practically speaking, from human standpoint, this is going to be the most comfortable position for black compared to some other positions, but the engine gives a huge advantage for white nevertheless. Of course, I would maybe choose this if I were playing with black. Definitely looks better than just giving up the pawn on d5. Alright, now we go to queen g3, which is the move that is actually the topic of today's lesson, and that is activity over the material, as white has now lost a pawn, and after ag will lose both rooks for the queen. We are to figure out how to evaluate the position if this kind of situation happens. So we must take ag, any other move is just bad. And now after rook h1 we have two moves. We have king e2 and king f2. If you haven't analyzed until this position, or you maybe missed queen takes g3, do now analyze. The move is, we will go a little bit deeper here. The move king e2 is of course blundering the queen due to rook h2, but the move king f2 makes rook h2 impossible because knight j2 will happen. Alright, they will take the rook, and here we are currently in a position where white is down material. We are down a pawn, which we can retake right away, but we have also given up two rooks for the queen, which is considered to be worse, especially in endgames. So how to evaluate this position? I have a little bit of a controversial, one of my students, Nick, said that this is very controversial and should be maybe a topic for a lesson, or here it is a video, and that's that we shouldn't count the material, but we should count only active material. And in this position, the active material for white is queen and the knight, and the active material for black is the rook. And maybe this knight once it lands on a6. Until the rook is active, until black castles, I will not think about it at all. So the position here is essentially rook up for white, in my standpoint. Why? Well, black's king is very, very unsafe and can come under attack of the pieces, of white pieces, and a possibility for that will happen right away. The move queen b4 is very strong, attacking b7, but I figured out the move knight d5 being the best here. So c7 is hanging. I think the only move that makes any sense is going to be knight a6. The move, for example, king d7 is possible, but queen f4 double attack on c7 and f7 seems to be losing pretty simply and pretty quickly. For example, just to notice, like here even knight c7, okay, we'll just win. I do not even have to calculate any checkmates, it's irrelevant. Or maybe even slightly simpler is this situation where we will take everything basically quickly. Alright, so knight a6, and here comes the moment of truth. We are in a situation where we can take queen e3 as a move, or play something better. We have a move here that wins. It's a little bit better than giving a check, and that's queen g5. And this is a very, very interesting move and very, very strong move. The point of it is going to be the following. The move king d7 will lead to huge loss of material here. Black is also not able to castle. And the move king f8 that seems to salvage in the case of queen e3, in this case won't salvage the position. So just to mention this, king d7 will fail due to check. And here, for example, even queen f7 just seems very, very strong. The rook can't get active, as the only square where it can get active is maybe d8. But then after queen e6, knight e7, and queen b3 seems like mate will happen pretty soon here. For example, c4 and queen b5 is checkmate threat. The only move that makes any sense to try to stop this is rook b6 and c6. Let's see, rook b6, queen a3, mate, yeah. c6, okay, no clear mate, but there is queen a3 winning the rook, which is good enough. Alright, so knight b4 also stops mate, but not for long. We will take the knight, and yeah, the position is quickly ending up in checkmate. Okay, so if they can't get the rook to any activity, then this king c6 move is just leading the king to more danger. King f8, and now the move that is the full point is queen h4. We're threatening to go queen h8 checkmate, and the only move that stops it is going to be f6 or king g8, the only two moves, but f6 loses the rook as it's allowing queen h8 still, and the move king g8 will allow us to give knight e7 check, and then I would include knight g6. Of course queen h8 is good enough, but why not take another pawn, after which we will go and grab the rook on a8, and now the position is, even to the naked eye, even to beginners who know only material and not anything else, is better for white. We are not only just going to be slightly better in this position because we have a queen for the rook and the knight, but we will probably be winning pretty soon, as several black pieces are just not coordinated, and there will be several double attacks happening probably very quickly. My favorite would be, for example, rook a2, queen g8, double attacking g7 and a2 pretty nicely. And yeah, okay, position is pretty much resignable in this position. Alright, so coming back to the starting position, here we have a very interesting position where white can take on f4 with the queen or with the knight. Taking with the queen would lead to an equal position. Taking with the knight would lead to a clearly better position with best play for black. And with queen g3 would lead to a completely lost position. So winning material doesn't always win us the game. King is the most important piece, and having a weak king will negate all the material gains in many situations. This is pretty much it for the first lesson, and here we had also on the screen 2 ways that you can contact me, and on davidmenzik.coach you can write me an email if you like. Of course, please like, subscribe, comment, everything that you want. Give suggestions about what to do next. I will be definitely doing maybe some kind of live play and many kind of this kind of videos where I will be explaining some concept from my game, from my students' games, sometimes going over full games, sometimes going over fragments of games, such as in this case. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.